Hello，你好，欢迎回来，Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger on March 17, 2021. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. I know I'm not wearing green, but I actually don't think I have anything of that color. Uh, but anyway, uh, I will just blame it on my blindness. Recent published video have gotten comments and stuff like that, and people say, how can he do that? He's blind. How can he do this? He's blind. And those kind of comments always tend to get to me. Of course I can do it. That's why I put it on video. If I couldn't do it, I wouldn't put it on video. So anyway, it's kind of silly. People are silly, but we are not going to get into that today because that's going to tread more on Soul Search Sunday territory, and we're here to do Wisdom Wednesday. And previously, we have talked about soy sauce and tofu and stuff like that. So today, I want to talk about another very important staple in Chinese culture, which is vinegar. As I mentioned last episode, back in the early uh, uh, 1900, uh, about 60, 70 years ago, a lot of things in China were heavily regulated, which means even if you had money, that didn't mean you would be able to buy a bag of rice. You would have to have not money to pay for it, and the store would have to have a bag of rice to sell you. And on top of that, you need to have the rice meal voucher, the rice ticket, to be able to legally purchase that bag of rice. And people only get so many uh, ticket of each variety every so often. So, which means if you run out of meat ticket this month, uh, even if you have the money, even if the store has meat, you can't buy it because you don't have meat ticket. You're not legally able to buy it. But there were only three items back then that were not regulated. That you can buy it anytime you want, as long as there's supply and as long as you have the money. One was soy sauce, second was vinegar, third was rice wine. So vinegar, obviously of great import to Chinese people. Where did this come from? How did this get started? Well, that is actually quite complicated because uh, China, being a really large place, and being a really large place with a lot of people, uh, people tend to have conflicting stories and origins for where these things come from. And you can't necessarily say who's right, who's wrong either, because you got to remember a lot of these happened 2 or 3 thousand years ago when people didn't have copyright, when there's no patent, and with no official record of who invented what. In another word, if someone in northern China uh, invented vinegar, and then a few months later someone in southern China invented vinegar, then there's no way to actually uh, accurately prove who invented it first. Both sides could argue that they actually invented first, and the other side stole it from them. It was that complicated. Now, vinegar, for the most part, were made with the same process as soy sauce. So this is why most places, most warehouses, factories, most makers of soy sauce would also make vinegar at the same time because the process apparently is very similar. Personally, I never made it, so I don't really know. Uh, Vinegar in Mandarin is called chu. Chu. This is a little bit of a awkward thing for non-Mandarin speaker to pronounce. So think of it as TSU, but you want to pronounce that T a little bit more. Chu. two. Um, People who play a lot of Japanese video game would be able to pronounce this a lot easier because we see that pronunciation in Japanese word a lot. Blah 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 two, blah 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 two. So two is vinegar. Next time you go to a Chinese restaurant, you want extra vinegar, and if you run into a Chinese waitress or waiter that doesn't know their English very well, don't panic. Don't make fun of them. Just say two, please. Can I have some extra two, please? In the old days, Chinese people uh, would address a lot of scholars, especially scholars that want to call themselves scholars, but they weren't actually all that smart. They weren't all that successful at the imperial exam. These were academics. These were people who stayed home and read a lot of books, but they never amount to much of anything. These were uh, geeks of the old days, nerds of the old days. People call them 半瓶醋. 半瓶醋 means half a jar of vinegar. Half a jar of vinegar. Now, why half a jar of vinegar? Because obviously they are only half full. They are not full to the top with knowledge. Otherwise, they would be more successful. So obviously, they were half-assing it. That's their old way of calling them half-assing their study. So they're half a jar of vinegar. They're only half full. They're not the whole thing. Why vinegar? Because a lot of these people, and if you watch Chinese movies and see the kind of scholar I'm talking about, they all look very dour. They all look very uh, angry. They look like they have a bitter life. They all look like they're suffering. They all look like the whole world doesn't understand them. The kind of the face look like, oh, I just drank a whole bottle of vinegar. It's really sour, and they can't stand it. They all have that kind of expression, and when they uh, when they are talking to people, they fidget a lot. They'll do a lot of things like pulling on their clothes, and I don't have sleeves, but they'll fiddle with their sleeves. Make big hand gestures, like they just drank a whole bottle of vinegar, and it's so bitter and so sour, and they can't sit still. So that's why people call them the half jar of vinegar, half bottle of vinegar, 半瓶醋. It's the scholars, the academics in the old days that didn't amount to anything. It was a kind of a way of laughing at them. We don't want we don't want we don't want to laugh at people, not nice. But since we're talking about vinegar, it's an interesting little uh, trivia to talk about. So back to the origin of vinegar. The most commonly accepted, the most commonly acknowledged origin is the origin of the goddess of vinegar, a woman with the name Wu, W-U, Wu, the goddess Wu. Didn't she have a name? She probably did, but here's the thing. In the old days in Chinese history, women mostly didn't get addressed by their name. After they got married, they basically just went by uh, their maiden name became their name. So let's say uh, your uh, Wu, your maiden name is Wu, and then you marry into a Thai family. Well, now your name becomes Tai Wu or Wu Tai, if you want to, last name. But in Chinese culture, we put the last name first, so it would be Tai Wu. So you actually ditch your original name. All you keep is your last name. So from the day you are married, you are known as just Wu. Uh, so anyway, the story of the goddess Wu. Uh, this happened about 2,000 years ago, um, give or take 100 years, there was a guy who was said to be the god of drinker, the god of drinking people. Uh, his name was Liu Lin. Liu Lin. That's Liu Ling. Liu Lin. Liu Lin was a guy who widely acknowledged to be the best drinker in China at the time, 2,000 years ago. He could outdrink anybody. He could drink anybody under the table. He loved to drink, and so after he died, he became known as the patron god of drinkers, alcoholic, anyone who likes their alcohol. Liu Lin. Now, Liu Lin's wife, Wu, uh, Wu, Wu, she was very upset with her husband for his drinking because he didn't work. He didn't want to go to do anything uh, productive. He just stay at home and study what kind of wine is good to go with what kind of alcohol is good to go with what, and how you have to drink this. This have to be drink cold, and this you have to drink hot. And he just uh, devoted all his time to alcohol, to the drinking, to the tasting of alcohol. So one day, uh, while Liu Ling was drunk and passed out, it took a lot for him to pass out, but he did. He passed out. Uh, Wu decided to play a trick on him. So she took a whole bunch of prunes and ginger and any kind of scrap, food scrap she could find about the house and threw them all into his big jug of wine, the jug of wine that he was sampling. Well, Liu Lin obviously drank a lot. Like I said, it took a lot for Liu Lin to pass out. So he slept for an entire week. After he woke up, what did he do? Immediately went to the jug of wine, wanted to continue drinking. And then he took a sip of that jug of wine, and Liu Lin went, "What the?" Insert your own swear word here. I don't know how they swore in China back then, but probably something akin to WTF. So he went, "What the? What happened to this? This tastes weird. It's oh, it's sour. It's gone bad." Now, remember, back then, they didn't have preservatives to put in food or alcohol or anything. And back then, there's no refrigeration. So after she threw these food scraps into this wine, for after a week, no refrigeration, no proper treatment, obviously it went bad. It went sour. So Liu Lin looked inside the jug and saw all these pieces of food scrap uh, floating near the bottom like decaying vegetation in his wine, and he was really annoyed. He knew what happened. He knew his wife played a trick on him. So he waited until she was out of the house, and he went and poured a cup of this sour, bad wine into the stew that she was preparing. Well, to his amazement, to everybody's amazement, that pot of stew turned out to taste wonderful, a lot better than it usually were, a lot more flavorful, a lot more tender. It just was the best stew she's ever made. And from that day on, they realized that if you let the wine go sour, if you let the wine go bad, it turns into this new thing called vinegar. And it's really great to use it with your food. So they actually started selling vinegar, and that was that allowed Liu Lin and Wu to become very rich, very popular people. And gradually, vinegar uh, became popularized all throughout China. And Wu in turn became the goddess, the patron goddess of vinegar. Even today, in many parts of China, in stores that specialize in selling uh, vinegar and soy sauce and other uh, condiments, they would have one. They would have the statue or the portrait of the goddess of vinegar, Wu herself. And on the 1st and the 15th of every month, they would pay tribute to the image of the goddess of vinegar so she could bless them to sell more vinegar and make more money. Now, the story of Wu, the goddess of vinegar, was probably the most popularly accepted version of the original story. But there's actually other origins of vinegar from different parts of China, and I want to run them by you guys today as well. The second story I'm going to tell you came from northeastern part of China. People from northeastern part of China said, no, 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 no. Wu didn't invent vinegar. It wasn't Wu. It wasn't uh, Liu Lin. It wasn't to do with the uh, patron god of alcoholics. It wasn't to do with the patron goddess of vinegar. The person who should be worshipped for vinegar should be the patron god of alcohol. Now, this kind of makes sense because without alcohol, there wouldn't have been vinegar. So technically, they're not wrong. Their version of the story was that thousands of years ago, there was a guy who invented alcohol and made a lot of money, made a lot of people happy, probably made a lot of people unhappy as well, but we don't talk about that part. Anyway, and this guy became known as the patron god of alcohol, the patron god who created alcohol, not drinking alcohol, not like Liu Lin. This guy actually invented alcohol. His name was Du Kang, Du Kang, Dukung, Du Kang. Um, Du Kang invented alcohol, became widely popular, very, very popular with people. As you can imagine, back then there's very little entertainment. Thousands of years ago, no television, no cartoon, no video game. And, until he invented alcohol, what would you do to pass time or uh, relax or rewind? Well, there's always fishing and hiking and stuff like that. But yeah, so alcohol was a big thing when Du Kang invented it, and Du Kang spent his life making, studying, trying out different ways of making alcohol, and his wine was so highly in demand that he had to constantly make new batches. Otherwise, he would run out and people would riot. But as Du Kang became old and more and more feeble, he was unable to keep up with the demand of people. So his son, Heita, 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 took over the family business and continued his father Du Kang's legacy of continue to make more and more wine. Unfortunately, Heita grew up in this alcohol making family. You can imagine, this guy grew up with a dad who spent his every waking hour studying, sampling, tasting, making alcohol. So obviously, Heita became an alcoholic. So one day, while Heita was supposed to be making a new batch of wine to restock their cellar, he got himself drunk and passed out for a week. This part of the story kind of similar to Liu Lin and Wu's story. Both guy was said to have passed out for a week. So after a week, Heita woke up and he saw that the, he had all these jugs of wine that he didn't put a seal on. They were open. And obviously by this time they've gone bad. No, they smell sour, and he tasted them. They tasted really sour, really awful. But what was he supposed to do? Because it was his job to restock the cellar, and he knew if he start over now and was trying to make a new batch from scratch, it's going to take another 2 or 3 days before they would be ready, and his dad would be really angry with him. So Heita decided, well, dad is kind of old and feeble, and most of the time he doesn't care what's going on, and he doesn't really know. So why don't I just put a seal on this bad batch of wine and put them in the cellar just for now. So when my dad come around to inspect the cellar, it will look like I did my job, and then later, when I have time, I will make a new batch and then replace these. And he will never know. And what he doesn't know won't hurt him. And what doesn't hurt him won't hurt me. So Heita put a seal on these batch of bad wine, put them in the cellar. Well, unfortunate for him, that very same day, Du Kang was feeling kind of nosy, kind of productive. He wanted to do something. You know how sometimes when you're old and you 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 lay around for a few days, you suddenly get that spurt of energy where you say, well, I want to get off my butt and I want to go look at the business. I want to go make sure everything's running. So Du Kang dropped by the cellar, the store, unannounced, and went into the cellar to inspect the batch of wine, and he saw that there's a new batch of wine on the shelf, and he uncorked one of them, and immediately he smelled it, and he went, "Whoa, what the?" Insert your own swear word here again. Uh, and he said, "This is weird. It's not supposed to smell like this." And then he put a little dipper in the jug and brought up a dipper full of this bad wine, and he drank it down, and he went, ugh, that tastes really weird. It doesn't feel like alcohol in my body. But amazingly, this vinegar made Du Kang feel a lot better. We all have heard of the home remedy, drinking a bit of apple cider vinegar every day will lower blood pressure, will lower cholesterol, will help your thyroid. It does all kind of amazing things to you when you drink a little bit of vinegar every day. So immediately, Du Kang could feel, hey, this thing tasted weird and it doesn't feel like alcohol, but I am feeling great. It's making me feel so good that all kind of aches and pains and lethargic feeling gone away. I feel like I am young again. So Du Kang told his son, "Look, I know what you did, but don't worry, I'm not going to punish you. This thing you just invented something great. This is a great medicine for people." So they started marketing vinegar as a home remedy to cure all kind of disease and aches and pains and restore energy, and it became widely popular. So to the people in northeastern China, Du Kang and his son Heita were the original patron god of vinegar. There's also yet another tale from the southern part of China uh, that said vinegar was not invented by Du Kang or Liu Lin's wife. There's no god or goddesses involved. That's pure superstition. How vinegar actually came to be was that 3,000 years ago, We are going way back, 3,000 years ago, during the Song Dynasty, at the end of the Song Dynasty, when the tyrant Zhao uh, demanded every winemaker to to present free and their best wine free of charge to the imperial court every year. So the story goes that one of these groups, one of these convoys that were supposed to bring the wine to the imperial court was delayed by bad weather and landslide and stuff like that. So by the time they got to the imperial court, the wine they were supposed to bring were bad already. Now they thought about running away, just ditching the wine and running away. But you can run away, but what are you going to do with your business and family? If you don't show up, the tyrant would have your entire family killed. So they thought, well, might as well go on with this. If he doesn't like the wine, then at the most he's going to kill us. He's not going to kill our family. But if we run away, he's going to blame our family. So they, despite the wine had gone bad, they brought it to the tyrant's court. Uh, and it said the, that day when the tyrant Zhao and his favorite beautiful queen were having a barbecue. Yeah, they actually did barbecue. That's historically proven that actually they actually did that. Um, they were having a barbecue in the imperial garden, and the servant announced that the new batch of wine has arrived. And the tyrant was very happy, and he said, "Bring them on, bring them over here. We will sample them right now, right here at the barbecue." And so they poured him a glass of this bad wine. And here we go again. He took a long drink of this goblet, uh, and he went, "Ugh, what the? Insert your own swear word here. What happened to this? This is crap. This is garbage. This is this gone bad. How dare you serve me bad wine?" And he, in a fit of rage, he threw this goblet. He threw his goblet across the table, and the wine, the bad wine, splashed all over the meat they were barbecuing. To his great amazement, when he ate when he ate the barbecue, it tasted 10 times better than before. It's so much more tender. It has a more of a tangy taste to it. It was great. It was awesome. It was a flavor that the tyrant had never experienced before. So from that day on, he decided that this bad batch of wine would be called vinegar, and they were to be used in any imperial court, any imperial kitchen. And gradually, it became so popular that even the common folks started using vinegar in their kitchen. Depending on where you're from in China and what you believe in, you may decide that one or most of these origin stories were probably fabricated, but they make interesting stories nonetheless. Um, and in every one of these tales, there's something humorous and uh, something funny to be had. Uh, if you ever experience something being stuck in your throat, if you ever experience, like, if you're eating a fish and you get a tiny fish bone stuck in your throat, or if you're eating nuts and other snacks and you get slivers of something stuck in your throat, drinking a few tablespoons of vinegar will make that go away. It will help soften it, dissolving it, uh, making that a lot easier to uh, get get it out of your throat. Either wash it down with water later or just cough it up. So that's a nice little home remedy to keep in mind. And don't forget, drinking a little bit of vinegar every day, apple cider vinegar, whatever. There's a lot of different versions of this. Uh, it's very beneficial to your health. Don't overdo it. Just a little bit every day is more than enough. Thank you for checking out today's Wisdom Wednesday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Toy Thursday. For now, 谢谢 and 再见。Camera choose